Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the special business meeting for the District of Squamish for Tuesday, July 6th. We are meeting tonight on the traditional unceded territory of the Squamish Nation. Motion to adopt the agenda. Moved by Councilor Herford, second by Councilor French. Any opposed? Motion carries. Ministerial Order M192. This may be one of the last times we actually have this out loud. Because of the public health orders, we cannot have people in council chambers, so we're ensuring openness, transparency, accessibility, accountability by the following means. This meeting is being live streamed. A video of this meeting will be available on the district's website for viewing on an on-demand basis. And the meeting is open to the public for electronic participation this evening via WebEx or telephone. Someone to move that? Moved by Councilor Stoner, second by Councilor Pettingill. Any opposed? Motion carries. We are meeting electronically, so when a council members disconnects or reconnects, if they can let me know, so this can be recorded in the minutes. Council members can identify themselves if they wish to speak by raising their hand. If they're connected by video, if on audio only, just say chair. With respect to a vote, council is only required to state the nay vote. No statements required if the members in favor. Please, everyone, tonight keep your telephone or computer on mute until it's your turn to speak. And council members, if you're having technical difficulties, please text the corporate officer. And if the technical difficulties are on our side, we'll recess for up to 10 minutes to get people reconnected again. All right, any notice of motion, council? Seeing none, we do have a delegation this evening. And it's my pleasure to welcome Sarah Blais to council chambers. Hopefully I got your last name correct, Sarah. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, it's Sarah Blais.
Sarah Blais. So Sarah is here to speak with us about accessibility concerns in the district. Welcome.
Thank you so much. And am I okay to have the floor now?
You do have the floor. Go ahead.
Great, thank you. Hello, Squamish City Council, and thank you for your time. I'm here today to speak about accessibility in Squamish. A couple years ago, I suddenly became in need of mobility aids, such as a wheelchair, walking sticks, or a cane, to get around. I was unable to park at businesses or doctors I needed to go to because of parking permit spaces being full. When I did find an accessible spot, I often struggled getting up onto and around the sidewalk. Downward grading on high slopes, cracked sidewalks, and gaps between squares made using my wheelchair to get around Squamish very difficult. Once on the sidewalk, my next challenge as someone with a disability is entering shops, as a majority of businesses and even condos do not have a disability button to open doors. I'm here today to advocate for people like myself living with disabilities in Squamish. I'm here to raise awareness to their needs and bring your attention to improvements that are necessary to make Squamish accessible for all. In 2016, the census found 12,275 people living with disabilities in the Squamish-Lillooet region. Of this total, 6,050 people live in Squamish. I'm not the first to note these issues in town. In February of 2018, the Squamish chief published an article that noted at the time 400 people in Squamish required a permit parking pass. As of December 2018, the provincial government transferred responsibilities of the enforcement and creation of disability parking spaces to municipalities. Our local bylaws govern this, and I have concerns that they are not detailed enough, nor are the consequences severe enough for violators. We as a town can improve these bylaws, but we need the help of the council to make the town we love more inclusive for all. For example, requiring disabled parking spots. Squamish can increase towing regulations and fines to include towing of vehicles that park in a permit space with no parking permit. Vancouver and Victoria both have accessibility working groups to represent the people in their community with disabilities. As of October 20, Delta instated a new mobility and accessibility committee. This gives all people the opportunity to provide direct input on new and old infrastructure. as well as programs to support mobility accessibility. The committee includes relevant municipal department representatives and people from the community. Squamish can be led by their example. In closing, I propose to this council that as Squamish is growing to keep up with the momentum, we create an initiative similar to the committees in Vancouver, Victoria, and Delta. I recommend attention to revisit and update Squamish bylaws and increase disability awareness in council. I appreciate the time to speak and be heard. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Council, any questions or comments? Council Pendo?
Just wondering, and thank you for the presentation, Sarah. If you are aware, are there any guides that lay out the sort of the aspects that are municipally controlled? Like I understand parking is something we can set. We can ask for certain things in rezonings, other stuff we don't have authority over. So just something that are there good guides that detail those distinctions?
Some things that I've personally found to have that distinction between whose responsibility it may rely or lay on is that when it's a city-owned space, then it's the responsibility of the council. But if it's privately owned, if the business or the land is privately owned, then it does become the responsibility of the landowner. So that is a definite distinction. I know that there will be some limitations on where we're able to move into and maybe try to help improve based on that. And I know one small side I'd like to make is the Squamish Hospital is incredibly difficult to get to and is very inaccessible on the outside. So that I wanted to keep as a separate note, but just in bringing it up, they are privately owned. So I know that the city council won't be able to move in that direction with them. So that is an example that they are privately owned and will have to be addressed separately.
Thank you. So, I'm glad you mentioned that, Ms. Blais, because Vancouver Coastal Health will be doing a master planning process for all their sites in the Sea to Sky corridor that should begin this year. And I think hearing that feedback for a health provider is really essential. I know on our advisory design panel, we have Sarah Tippler, who advises on accessibility for new infrastructure, but you're right, there's a lot of old and existing infrastructure that it needs to be considered. And I know we looked at this in my first term, got feedback on from the seniors because we had where the curbs let down, we often had a bump before it hit the pavement, and so their walkers would strike this bump and they couldn't. Became a tripping hazard, obviously, and it was difficult for people in chairs as well. So, so we know we can always do better. We'll be discussing our next budget cycle towards the end of this month, and it's a great opportunity for council to consider what types of committees and that it may need to strike. And so I think your presentation is timely before we have that conversation, and we can consider your ask within that meeting later this month.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And it's exciting to hear about VCH doing their revising and reallocating of funds. I've been met with nothing but great responses from everyone in City Council. I've been on the phone a lot with most of you and with lots of public works. And I just have to say you guys all have been great and very reciprocal in hearing this. I'm just excited to speak at the City Council and put it out here. It's just my next step. And moving forward, I'm sure I'll be speaking more with some of you personally.
That's great. We're always open to the feedback, and I know our staff really appreciate it as well, so that we understand people's lived experience about being moving about our community. And we're also updating our streetscape designs and public realm designs for downtown, which is another great opportunity to have this feedback as part of that as well. So thank you for taking the time tonight to join us, and We'll certainly take your ask into consideration at our budget discussion before the summer break. Thank you. Okay, so we're at consideration of unscheduled public attendance. So this is anybody who feels they have an emergent and urgent issue that can't wait until 2 weeks from now when we meet again. This is an opportunity to raise your hand. If you're here to speak to the development variance permit, that's coming up next. You'll have an opportunity to speak to that then. But if there's another urgent issue, this is the time. Yes. See no hands, we'll move on to item 8 on our agenda. These are reports from community planning and infrastructure. And first up is the Plaza at Junction Park development permit number 521. It does have variances, so I will have staff make their presentation, and then we'll go to council for questions, and then we'll go to the public.
Thanks very much, Mayor and Council. I'm just queuing up my presentation here. Is everybody able to see the presentation okay?
We can, thank you.
Thanks very much. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name's Asia Philp, planner with the Community Planning and Infrastructure Department. Tonight I'm presenting a development permit application for the Plaza at Junction Park proposal located at 37870 Cleveland Avenue in downtown Squamish. This application includes 4 variances that I'll outline after first reviewing the development proposal and the form and character. Aerial overview of the site and surrounding land uses are shown here. The site is comprised of an entire downtown block located between Cleveland Avenue and Loggers Lane, Main Street to the north, and Vancouver Street to the south. The block was rezoned over the course of 2017 and 2018 to the current CD 37 zone. The overall building envelopes, including the height, massing, and siting of the buildings, were set through this rezoning process. The site falls within development permit areas 3 and 5, triggering the DP application brought forward for council's consideration tonight. A bird's eye view of the Plaza at Junction Park development is shown here. There are 3 main building masses across the block. So starting from the left-hand side, the northernmost building is comprised of a 4-story office. Attached to the office is a 6-story mixed-use building with commercial and parking at grade, a parkade on the 2nd story, and 4 stories of residential above. The south building is an 8-story mixed-use building, also with commercial and parking at grade, a parkade on the 2nd story, and 6 stories of residential above. Additional views of the development show the form and character of the buildings across the length of the block. The view along the Cleveland frontage is shown in the top rendering, and the view along Loggers Lane is the bottom. Commercial uses front Cleveland, Main, and Vancouver at the street level, and commercial uses wrap around the mid-block plaza and front at key locations along Loggers Lane. There's a total of 25% of the development's gross floor area dedicated to employment space. Vehicle access to the parkades and loading is located off Loggers Lane. Public art is provided on the north building across the 2nd story Loggers Lane frontage. The installation of the First Nations design of a 2-headed serpent created by our artist James Harry. This image shows the proposed Cleveland Avenue commercial storefront from a pedestrian perspective. The storefronts are demised to maintain the historical, smaller scale rhythm along Cleveland Avenue. There are a few different storefront types to create variety over the length of the buildings. The commercial units are designed to open and spill out onto the street, particularly around the plaza spaces. So the 3 plaza spaces are shown here. Moving clockwise from the top left, we have a rendering of the Vancouver Street corner plaza at the southern end of the block. Next is the mid-block plaza, which breaks up the long block and provides a pedestrian connection from Cleveland to Loggers. Last is a rendering of the Main Street Plaza at the north end of the block, which is the largest of the 3 public spaces, and it serves multiple functions as a versatile public space and active transportation pathway. It's designed to accommodate events, food trucks, and other market uses, and it integrates the new plaza space with the existing UCM Pavilion and Junction Park beyond. The proposal was reviewed against Development Permit Area 3 and 5 guidelines. The development has multiple cladding treatments and features perforated metal screens across portions of the residential facades. At the street level, the commercial storefronts feature basalt stone faces and wood soffit canopies. There's planters along the edges of the 3rd story that will encourage vegetation to cascade over the edges and down towards these commercial facades. The overall design of the buildings have a West Coast modern type aesthetic. The design as proposed meets DPA 3 and 5 guidelines. The applicant has revised their affordable housing components as the project was brought to Committee of the Whole in April in order to help offset the variances being requested. Previously, 24 affordable rental and 16 market rental units were provided in the northern building. Now, 28 affordable rental and 12 market rental units are being provided and are proposed to be secured in perpetuity through 2 associated housing agreements that are being brought forward for consideration of first 3 readings in tandem with DP 521. Floor plans for the residential units are shown here. For the affordable units, 19 are studios, 7 units are 1 bedrooms, and 2 units are 2 bedrooms. And for the market rental units, 11 are studios and 1 is a 2-bedroom unit. The land development agreement negotiated through the rezoning process secured the number of dwelling units to be dedicated as rental, but it did not secure unit size or type. The unit type breakdown was determined by the developer. 4 variances are being requested. The first variance is to reduce the indoor amenity space required from 402 square meters down to 255 square meters. The floor plans shown here are the locations of the amenity spaces are highlighted in red. The proponent added the rooftop sunrooms to increase the amount of amenity space. Staff are in support of this variance as a significant amount of outdoor usable open space has been provided via the level 3 and rooftop patios. The addition of sunrooms on the rooftops trigger the need for a companion height variance. This height variance is to allow for the enclosed sunrooms on the rooftops of each building, as these sunrooms are considered habitable floor area and are not exempt from the height requirements of the zoning bylaw. Staff consider the sunrooms to be an enhancement to the proposed development, bringing increased functionality to the rooftop patios. Therefore, staff are in support of this companion height variance to increase the maximum permitted height for the sunrooms only. The third variance is to increase the number of cash and lieu spaces eligible for buyout. The zoning bylaw requires 75 commercial parking spaces, but allows for 38 spaces to be bought out through the parking cash and lieu provisions. The applicant is providing 34 spaces on site and is requesting to pay cash and lieu for an additional 4 commercial parking spaces for a total of 42 cash and lieu spaces. This equates to $630,000 cash in lieu. In addition to the 34 parking commercial spaces on site, there will be approximately 20 on-street parking spaces along Cleveland. The development is also within 150 meters walking distance of 2 bus stops. The zoning bylaw has reduced parking space requirements for the downtown, and the district is moving forwards with its vision for a highly walkable downtown with access to alternative transportation options. So with this vision in mind and infrastructure in place to support alternative transportation modes, staff are in support of this variance to increase the commercial parking buyout by an additional 4 spaces. Staff are further recommending that the $630,000 be placed in the Alternative Forms of Transportation Reserve Fund to be put towards several future active transportation infrastructure projects that are located in the vicinity of this development. Staff has provided an alternative recommendation for council consideration to place half of the cash in lieu in the alternative transportation reserve fund and the other half in the municipal off-street parking facilities reserve fund. The last variance requested is to reduce loading from 3 spaces down to 2. Staff are in support of the variance and anticipate that much of the quick loading activities will occur off Cleveland Avenue, closer to the commercial unit front entries. With that in mind, we've landed on a similar approach as to the main across the street by marking 2 loading-only spaces along Cleveland Avenue in front of each building's main entrance. These are shown in green on the site plan here. The 2 on-site loading spaces are provided off Loggers Lane, adjacent to the waste room of each building. These are shown in red on the site plan. Staff have included a condition in DP 521 that the 4 variances, if approved by council, will only be granted subject to all the dwelling units being equipped with a renewable energy source for heating and that no gas fireplaces be installed. This is in alignment with the recently adopted low carbon incentive program. Aspects of the project align with several council's strategic plan priority areas highlighted here. The development will be built to step 3 of the energy step code for the commercial portions and step 4 for the residential portions. 20% of the residential units are rental. 25% of the total gross floor area of the development is dedicated as employment space. And 3 public spaces are provided across the development, enhancing downtown Squamish's public realm. District and legislative processes were followed for this DP application. 1 public comment and request for a public information meeting was received. Therefore, no public information meeting was held. Notification of the 4 variances requested were mailed and delivered to property owners and tenants within 100 meters of the site. 12 comments were received associated with these variance notices, with concerns vocalized by residents regarding impacts to views, parking, and property values. So this concludes the presentation on DP 521. I'll finish by quickly running through the formal staff recommendations, which are that Squamish authorize DP 521, subject to the provision of $630,000 cash in lieu, in place of providing 42 commercial parking spaces, to be placed in the alternative forms of transportation reserve fund. 2, the registration of housing agreement covenants to secure the 28 affordable rental and 12 market rental units. 3, the registration of a new flood covenant and discharge of the old covenant. And 4, district staff acceptance of the invasive herbaceous species assessment and fisheries assessments, so the environmental reports. Further, that DP 521 include variances to the following sections of the zoning bylaw: that the amount of indoor amenity space be reduced from 402 square meters to 255 square meters, that height be increased for the rooftop indoor amenity spaces only for building A 27 meters up to 30.72 meters, and for building B from 20 meters up to 23.72 meters, that the number of eligible cash and lieu spaces be increased from 38 spaces to 42 spaces, that the number of loading spaces be reduced from 3 spaces to 2 spaces. And further, that the Mayor and General Manager of Corporate Services be authorized to execute the DP. And finally, that Housing Agreement Bylaw number 2815 for the affordable rental units be given first 3 readings, and that Housing Agreement Bylaw number 2633 for the market rental units also be given first 3 readings. That concludes my presentation, and I'll pass it back to the chair at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Phillip. So before I open up to the public for comment, I'll just ask council if you have any clarifying questions. Councilor Ricker?
Thank you. And I think you touched on in your presentation, but I just want to be clear with this height variance. The rest of the, I guess we'll call it infrastructure on the roof, is anything on the roof taller than this already? Like, to me, on the drawings, it showed that this height variance just for the sunrooms still didn't break the threshold of the other things on the roof. Is that correct?
Through the chair. So in response to the elevator penthouses, the stairwell pop-ups and the mechanical rooms are also above the maximum height requirement, but these are exempt from having to meet the height requirements of the zoning bylaw.
Okay, so in the practical sense, are they still above this variance? Some of those items?
No, these are in line with the height of the sunroom height.
Okay, so same height. Okay, thank you. And I was curious, this cash in lieu parking piece, what does that do to the, what spots are those? Are we talking, and how are accessible spots dealt with in this? If a certain percentage of the overall is accessible parking spots, when we do the cash in lieu, how do we think of that?
The accessible spots are not exempt and need to be fully provided according to the zoning bylaw minimum requirements. So the number of accessible spots has not been reduced or bought out through the cash in lieu option.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Stoner?
Thank you. Through the chair, just two quick questions. I was trying to look at the design and I wasn't able to pull out. Of the Class B bike stalls, how many are actually covered, if any?
Through the chair, so there's 12 Class B, so those are the publicly accessible bike stalls for anybody to use. And those are located in the lobby area and are fully covered. There are also another dozen, approximately 12 bike parking stalls within the plaza in public bike racks.
Thank you. And then my other question was just around the commitment around energy efficiency included as a condition of DP 521. The low carbon incentive program removes the ability for both gas fireplaces and gas cookware or cook stoves. And I'm just curious why that hasn't been outlined as part of the condition.
Through the chair, so we have a commitment from the developer in regards to fireplaces, but we haven't confirmed the cooking facilities, and we can do that with the developer. I'm sure they'll be amenable to that. So that can also be included just as a verbal commitment from the developer.
Thank you.
Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, a couple things. We had a lot of conversation last time, I think, about the plaza, and we see some bollards and some small adjustments. Does this secure this particular design, or is there still flexibility going forward? Like, are we signing off on a particular plaza design in this?
Through the chair, no, you're not signing off. The Main Street Plaza is still subject to staff review, and we are working with the developer to continue to refine and tweak that plaza design. And so that's separate from this development permit review. However, the mid-block plaza between the two buildings and the plaza at the Victoria Street end, the small one, are covered under this development permit application because they're located on this developer's private property.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, in terms of, there's a question about reallocating funds as part of this, or allocating parking in lieu funds. If we allocated some of those funds to a future off-street parking facility, municipal one, but then decided after some analysis that didn't make sense for us to invest in that, are we able to move the funds around, or what's the flexibility in changing our mind after the fact if these funds are assigned in a particular way as part of this resolution?
Yeah, through the chair, I'll address this, and then if Gary or Heather wants to chime in to correct me, please do so. But my understanding, and I clarified this with the financial department, is that those funds are movable within and between the two funds. So you can allocate them at this time, and then that's not set in stone going forwards.
Okay, thank you. And then the last thing, I'm wondering if any of the units and or the common spaces are cooled or have cooling infrastructure.
Through the chair, not to my knowledge. I think that there is passive cooling based on the design with the overhead protection, weather protection that actually will provide shading. So some passive cooling going on, but not anything above and beyond that passive approach.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Phillip, when we talked about this project at Committee of the Whole in April, there wasn't a parking variance for above and beyond what was allowable under the cash in lieu, but now there is. So what changed between then and now?
Through the chair, so this developer is providing an excess number of residential parking spaces. Essentially, they wanted to take some of their commercial stalls and put them towards the residential units, the larger 2-bedroom residential units, to provide 2 parking stalls to the larger residential units. And so due to that desire, that's how this cash in lieu variance came about.
And then I'm trying to remember where this is. Maybe an OCP policy versus a zoning bylaw policy, but I thought we had said that we wanted a certain number of units to be for families in every development, and I can't tell from the rezoning timeline whether this preceded that or came after.
Through the chair, I'll try to take a stab at that, trying to recall as well. There's a policy in the official community plan that speaks to a minimum number of 3-bedroom units. And so the OCP was adopted in 2017, and this rezoning was adopted in 2018. So the OCP preceded this rezoning.
And are there any of those family units?
There are no 3-bedroom units in the development.
And then I'll come to you, Councillor Smith. Just have a follow-up question. When I look at the housing agreement that goes with this, and then the rents that are being charged, our professional affordable housing policy, if I read it correctly, has maximum and minimum income levels. But it looks like some of the rents exceed 30% of those income levels. For a studio where you have one person living. So I just wanted to sort of say how, like, am I wrong? Am I doing my calculations incorrect? Or what are those rents based on?
Through the chair, so I'm just pulling up the housing agreement. The rental rates that are under the Schedule D maximum permitted rent, those are maximum rates, and they were solely based on the CMHC market rates and taking 80% of those CMHC median rates. And that is the maximum rent that the developer can charge for these affordable units. In section 1.1 T, under permitted rent, it specifies that the maximum monthly rent for each particular affordable housing unit would be the lesser of the rental rates set out in Schedule D, so the CMHC rates, and 1/12 of 30% of the eligible tenants before tax income. So the actual permitted maximum rent that could be charged would be tailored to each tenant and would be geared either to the maximum CMHC or the 30% of their income if that's less than the CMHC.
Okay. So in Schedule C, it says income, rental PAH, maximum income requirement for one person household is 34,453. But the 880 rent for a studio, and most of these are studios, exceeds 30% of that on an annual basis. But what you're saying is that it will be based on income, not based on what's in Schedule D.
It would be the lesser of the two.
Okay. Councillor Stoner?
Yeah, just to pick up on a few questions from the mayor. In terms of the diversity of affordable units, there are no 3 bedrooms, but there are 2 bedrooms plus den, and none of those are being provided in either the affordable or the market rental. And I'm curious how that came to be given our policy.
Yep, through the chair. There are 2 affordable rental units that are 2-bedroom units, and one of the market rental units is a 2-bedroom unit. But you're correct, they're not the 2-bedroom plus den, so the slightly larger 2-bedroom unit size. And to speak to the second part of the question, when we negotiated the land development agreement, you know, our housing needs assessment was underway at the same time, and we weren't focused on securing the unit size or type. You know, we were mostly primarily aiming just to get a higher number of rental units than what our CAC policy at that time proposed. So we were working with this interim CAC policy, which really just sought to get cash in lieu rather than providing in-kind units. And then we had this forthcoming draft CAC policy, which is the one that we're using right now. And neither of them specified, you know, a focus on unit size or type. So it's been a real learning experience for us over the past few years, where we were really just purely focusing on getting the number, as many units as we could, and not looking at the unit type breakdown or kind of the size of these units. And that's something that we've really shifted in the past couple of years, and now we are looking at it, but it was a bit of a miss back in 2017 when we first began these negotiations.
Thanks for that clarification. My other question was just also on the housing agreement, and is now the time to discuss that as well? Yeah. As we continue to progress and advance an affordable housing authority, we've had discussions around how we actually come to manage the affordable housing units under the district's affordable housing forthcoming enterprise, whatever it chooses to look like. And I'm just curious, having read through this agreement, it's kind of our standard template where there is no expectation for those affordable housing units to be managed by our affordable housing authority. And I'm curious about when and how we start to incorporate that into these housing agreements, because it'll still be a while until they're built. Hi, Gary.
Thank you, through the chair. Again, it's a bit of a timing issue here. When we were developing this housing agreement, it was a bit of a work in progress. It's only in the last 2 weeks that we've got the boilerplate polished to the point that we think we can require that societal management. But I say this thing's been under development Asia for what, over a year?
Oh, yeah, so we locked in the LDA in 2018, so it's been 3 or 4 years since we've been revising our policies, and we've missed some of the stuff subsequently since locking this in at an early stage.
So it's really not included in this one on a timing issue, but going forwards, that boilerplate is remedied to close that gap. It doesn't preclude the developer choosing to do that. It doesn't require the developer to do that.
Right, council, any further questions before I go to the public? Council Pena?
Yeah, just the way the agreement or this is framed, it makes it seem like the low emissions units is an exchange for the parking variance only, and then the other stuff are just straight variances, kind of unrelated. Is that an accurate assessment? Those two specific things are tied together, and the rest is just a variance and take it or leave it, or is this like a package thing, or just?
Yeah, through the chair, it's definitely a package thing. So in the draft development permit itself, it says that all of the variances are subject to, and then it lists out the low carbon building standards.
Okay, I'm going to go to the public now. The proponent members of the public will be given the opportunity to be heard electronically, via telephone, or from your computer with respect to the proposed variances to development permit 521. The proposed variances to the development permit are outlined in the staff report. Do I have to read out all variances?
You're supposed to,
Okay,
because that's what people know they were allowed to speak to.
okay. Members of the public can speak to the variances and the variances only as part of a development variance permit process. So the District of Squamish authorized development permit 521. Property is legally described as Lot B, Block 20, District Lot 586, Plan 20801, Lot C, Lot D. I don't need to read all that. Located at 37870 Cleveland Avenue in Squamish, British Columbia, subject to the provision of a $630,000 cash in lieu, in place of providing 42 commercial parking spaces to be placed in the District of Squamish Alternative Forms of Transportation Fund. Registration of the housing agreement to secure 28 units of affordable rental, 12 units of market rental in perpetuity, and the registration of an updated Section 219 flood fund. And then the district accept the invasive species assessment and fisheries assessment. And that the development permit 521 include variances to the following sections of the zoning bylaw number 22/2011 in effect at the time of application. The section 4.43 indoor amenity space be varied to reduce the amount of indoor amenity space from 402 meters squared to 255 meters squared, and subject to the associated housing agreement committing 28 residential units as affordable rental units, that section 40 GG, comprehensive development zone 37, subsection 40 GG.2, maximum height be varied to increase the height for the rooftop indoor amenity spaces only. The rest of the building shall conform to the CD 37 maximum height requirement. So on principal building A, that is varied from a height of 27 meters to 30.72 meters, and on building B, that is varied from 20 meters to 23.72 meters. Subject to any and all dwelling units being equipped only with renewable energy sources for heating, equivalent to the low carbon building standards as defined by our zoning bylaw for apartment dwellings. That section 41, off-street parking, subsection 41.2C1, location of parking facilities, be varied to increase the number of eligible cash and lieu spaces from 38 to 42, and that the off-street loading subsection 42.4 be varied to reduce the number of living spaces from 3 to 2. So those are the variances that the public can speak to. To participate on WebEx, you raise your hand by going to the participant box and clicking on the hand icon. If you're on the phone, you dial *3. And then we have a moderator, Terry, who will be helping us take calls this evening. So yes, if you're on WebEx, you'll receive a voice prompt, or sorry, a dialogue box when it's your turn to speak. And if you're on the telephone, you'll hear a voice prompt that is your turn to speak. I'll now turn it over to Terry to see if the proponent or members of the public wish to speak.
Thank you, Matt. We have no hands raised at the moment.
So are those instructions up on the screen for people to see? *3 if you're on the telephone, or you can raise your hand by going to the participant panel on WebEx and clicking on the hand icon. I think now that the telephone number and the instructions for WebEx are on your screens.
Mayor, I think I have a phone call coming in.
Great.
So, caller, you can go ahead, please. Please state your name and neighborhood for the record. And you have 5 minutes to address council. Please go ahead.
Hi. Okay, it's hard for me to hear clearly, but my name is Jennifer, and I'm calling in regarding the height of the proposed building. So if this is the opportunity to say, then I'm opposed to increasing the height, and I find that already the building in that certain location is too high for downtown Squamish.
Jennifer, for the record, we just need your last name and your neighborhood.
Okay, Jennifer Roberts, and I live downtown.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Currently no hands up.
So again, *3 if you're on your telephone, or WebEx, raise your hand in the participant panel. Council, do you have any further questions? Councilor Pettingill?
I'm not sure if staff will be able to answer this, but the way we're structuring the affordable housing agreements, if the province came out with legislation requiring buildings to have active cooling or say renewable energy throughout or that sort of thing, do our agreements put us as a manager sort of with responsibility of that, or are they structured so that it's still the developer, the landowner that's responsible, and we're just sort of managing, aside from infrastructure investment and all that, we're just sort of managing the rental rates?
I guess your question is, do we have any further obligations?
Yeah, in the future, might we be incurring some because of the Affordable Housing Authority agreements?
Mr.
Chair, I think this is a Gary question likely, but in this particular scenario, the developer is owning and maintaining these units as far as we know, so it would be outside of the district's responsibility, but Gary should speak to the other scenario that you talked about.
Does that answer your question, Councilor Gill, or do you need further? Because I don't want to get into hypotheticals about other buildings, but in this building, they're being held by the developer.
Right. Yeah. I just sort of, Yeah, if we're not going to be on the hook for that sort of infrastructure change in the future, that's sort of what I want to know. And it sounds like we wouldn't be. So that's good. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, council? We don't have any hands up from the public, so. All right, so we're gonna go to our moderator one more time. No hands
No
up.
hands, Mayor.
Council, one last time to you. No further questions? All right, so there's quite a lengthy recommendation from staff here. Ms. Phillip, Councilor Stoner did comment on not having gas stoves. Do you believe that is an amendment that is, won't change the DP?
Through the chair. No, and we can get written confirmation separately and tie that to the building permit process.
Okay. All right, council, what is your direction? Councilor Stoner?
I will move the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councilor Hurford seconds. Would you like to comment? Go ahead, Councilor Stoner.
Yeah, I will speak to this. I am willing to support the variances that are being requested at this time, because I do think generally they are defensible. I appreciate that there are some concerns around the additional height of the structure. However, that is very much a small portion of the building. It doesn't change the actual overall, the massing of the building. It is simply enclosing a small piece of the rooftop that was already going to be there. So appreciate that we've received some comments around this feeling like too tall of a building, it being 6 and 8 stories, but that is not part of this variance being requested. That was something that was agreed to and confirmed through rezoning many years ago. So I think that the addition of enclosing the rooftop space will make that rooftop amenity more usable to those who are living there year round. So I am willing to support that one in particular. With regards to the cash in lieu additional variance for the parking, I appreciate the developer's interest in securing more residential parking spaces, also knowing the challenges that we've had with multi-bedroom units, having more vehicles than just the one that is currently allocated. I think that this is a good location with regards to easy access from transit and active transportation to support that minor variance of 4 parking stalls being bought out. And we'll be able to use that money to further improve our active transportation realm. I think that that's it. Appreciate the move towards the low carbon building standards in exchange. I think that that is very important, especially given the week that we just had. That everything that we can do to move in a direction of low carbon buildings moving forward is vital. So willing to support these variances. I do wish that there was a broader diversity of affordable housing units being presented and provided, especially in that 2-bedroom plus den, but recognize also that this is a timing issue relative to where our policies were in place, but going forward, definitely taking into consideration in any future allocation of affordable housing units, the diversity of those units and making sure that they are fit for purpose for our community will be very important. But appreciate that it's a timing issue on this one, so I'll let it go. Thank you.
Councilor French?
Thank you, and I'm going to turn off my video because I've been noticing a little bit of lag, just to preserve bandwidth. So this development is going to bring us much needed housing spaces and affordable rental, along with market rental. And the developer is delivering a very sharp looking set of buildings on an important piece of property in downtown Squamish. I support the variances and support the motion in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councilor Pettingill and then Councilor Anderson.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'm going to be supporting this. Still having a little bit of hesitation. You know, I do support the parking variances. For me, getting the low carbon, the comprehensive low carbon commitment in writing is critical to this. I'm not comfortable leaving it verbal, but it sounds like we can achieve that as part of this. I do regret the lack of diversity in the affordable units, but it sounds like this is consistent with policy developed at the time. So I think that the stumbling block for me is the reduction in common space, indoor common amenity space. And I understand that none of the space is cooled, but in my mind, adding active cooling to the community or communal space would be more practical. And just with the news over the last week, ocean fires and forest fires, and it's, you know, thinking about what's coming. I understand it's late in the day, but the importance of cooling centers, they're suddenly really, really important. And so having some space that would be practical to cool for people, that's where I'm just hesitating a little bit. But again, trying to recognize this is arguably a new requirement, and it would be the developer's responsibility to deal with this. If it becomes mandated in the future, it gives me some comfort. So that's a little piece I'm struggling with. So I will probably end up supporting this, but just listen to the following, the last comments from my colleagues before I finally decide. Thanks.
Councilor Anderson.
I would be supporting each of the variances. I think that the off-street loading is workable. The height, I find that this is not going to be a significant intrusion to viewscapes. And I note that in other buildings downtown that have gone up, such spaces on the roof are well used. And I attended the original public information meeting at the Adventure Center in 2018, I believe it was, and the residential parking issue was by far the most prominent issue, voices of concern at that time. So I'm in support of that as well. Or I will not be supporting this recommendation over the matter of the disposition of the cash in lieu. I would instead be supporting the alternative staff recommendation of placing 50% in alternative forms of transportation reserve fund and 50% in a municipal off-street parking facilities reserve fund. I think we need to get serious about planning in this precinct of downtown Squamish a parking facility. So I just like to register my concern on that point. So I'll not be supporting the staff recommendation. Thank you.
Councilor.
Thank you. I'll be supporting the staff recommendation. This is a challenging piece when we see something that's sort of been in process for so long. It comes to us for the last touches, and it's tempting for the community to sort of put the whole piece under scrutiny. But when I look at the height, as discussed earlier, if we said no to the variance in the height, the building is the same height. This doesn't substantially change the height of the building. And I do think that it gives us the community a better building. So I'm supportive of that piece. Similarly with the parking, we've been seeing parking within a commercial space, and we need to make sure that the people that are living in these buildings and and our densified downtown stand a chance of being able to work walking or cycling distance from their home, and commercial space is a key part of that. I see it as sort of pushing forward between the parking and the commercial space as one of our bigger challenges. So in this case, I will take the commercial space over more parking spaces. The loading makes sense. To me, I think that's just a new modern way of accommodating the loading. And I'm happy to see the affordable piece. I also do have concerns around the diversity of those affordable units. And I know that we can do better in future developments, but this does fit where we are at this point. So I'll be supportive.
Thank you. I'm going to support this. I think the additions to the public realm are going to be very welcome in that part of downtown. I know we're still working on the Main Street Plaza, but I think integrating that with Ocean Pavilion and Junction Park is a real benefit to our community, and having more gathering space and programmable space within our downtown is fantastic. I like that this building didn't incorporate or these three buildings left the office separate and wasn't trying to make it part of the second floor. So we really have the distinct office use. I think it's a unique looking building. And we'll integrate with that Main Street Plaza really well. I think the Indigenous art on the Loggers Lane side, it's fantastic. Pays tribute to one of the stories related to the chief. And you know, we learn a bit as we go. And certainly it was a miss to not include the size of units back in the day, but we are getting 12 market rentals and 24 affordable units. And hey, we do have people that are single and would be happy in a studio apartment. It's just that, you know, we did miss out having some 3-bedroom suites here and having a mix. And I know Ms. Phillips spoke to this. We've learned that lesson. We're now looking at the type and variety of affordable housing units being provided in our updated policy. So, you know, I can kick myself for not noticing that when we did the rezoning back in last term. But there you go. You can't win them all. I like the fact that the variances have increased the number of affordable units in that negotiation, as well as the low carbon, and we'll be at step 4 on these buildings, so they'll be very efficient to live in and operate, which is great for the people that have been living there. So overall, I think this is a net benefit to the downtown, and variances are supported with that. I will see no other hands. I will call the question. Any opposed? Councillor Anderson opposes. Motion carries. Thank you very much, Ms. Phillips.
Thanks.
All right. We are now on item 9 of our agenda under bylaws. First up is the District of Squamish amended bylaw for 1257 Commercial Way. This is bylaw 2752. Mr. Daly, welcome.
Thank you. Just loading up my presentation. Can everyone see that all right?
Yes, we can.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Brian Daly, Development and Subdivision Coordinator with Community Planning. I'm here tonight to present a rezoning application at 1257 Commercial Way for consideration of first and second reading. The subject property is located at 1257 Commercial Way and is zoned Specialized Business Service Center, I-9. The property is located within the expanded commercial activities area of the business park. Adjacent properties are zoned Specialized Industrial Business, I-8. Properties to the south are zoned Business Park Industrial, I-11, and the property to the east is zoned Adventure Highway Commercial, C-11. The southern portion of the property is currently developed with 4 buildings. The amendments in this rezoning application have been requested by the landowner to encourage uses from the business-serving commercial sector, as the majority of the site has attracted tenants from the food and fitness sector. The rezoning application seeks to allow personal service establishment as a permitted use, subject to certain conditions, and make amendments to the conditions of use section in the I-9 zone. No changes are proposed that would increase the allowable size of the buildings on the unbuilt portion of the property. These amendments are only related to use. The proposed amendments should increase flexibility for a number of uses in the I-9 zone, which will hopefully lead to a more diverse mix of businesses as opposed to the majority of the tenants being restaurants, as is occurring in the built section of the property. The proposed changes will help achieve the vision of a business park commercial service center identified for this property in the OCP and contemplated in the expanded commercial activities area implemented through the business park zoning update. The rezoning can be summarized as follows. Personal service establishment has been added as a permitted use. Conditions of use associated with personal service establishment have been added to restrict this use to 3 uses total and not more than 418 square meters of gross floor area in the I-9 zone, and also an additional maximum individual tenancy of 158.4 square meters. Staff have been negotiating this proposed use over the last year with the applicant and are supportive of allowing limited personal service establishment uses on this site. OCP policy supports limited commercial uses that serve the needs of employees of the business park. Conditions of use associated with business and professional office minor have been removed to allow more flexibility for this use to occur in the I-9 zone. OCP policy supports offices that are not used by the general public on a day-to-day basis, such as consulting firms, software firms, and research and development companies in the business park. The shortage of office space within the district continues to persist. An additional condition of use associated with restaurant has been added to restrict restaurant use to the existing built location in the I-9 zone, as shown on this slide. No restaurants would be permitted in the remaining unbuilt portion of the site. To increase flexibility for retail tenants, the 140 square meter minimum individual retail tenancy has been reduced to 102 square meters and allows for a further reduction below 102 square meters, provided that the shortage of floor area is taken by the adjacent tenancy. This amendment is intended to allow for more flexibility for potential retail tenants. The 140 square minimum tenancy size has made it difficult for the landowner to attract retail tenants, and the larger size may discourage smaller local businesses from locating there. Language limiting retail store to business and employees serving goods and services has been removed. This language is vague and challenging to interpret. The maximum gross floor area of all retail, restaurant, postal outlet, and financial institution uses has been reduced from 5,574 square meters to 4,181 square meters. This reduction was offered by the proponent in exchange for the addition of limited personal service establishment use in the zone. There is approximately 1,400 square meters of restaurant space currently on site. The reduction of the overall gross floor area associated with these uses will allow for a greater proportion of gross floor area of the unbuilt portion of the site to be available for the other uses in I-9, such as light industrial. The Business Park Commercial Service Center is similar to a neighborhood node, where the goal is to allow for businesses that would provide services for employees of the business park. Allowing a limited number of personal service establishment uses, such as a barbershop or a health and veterinary clinic, would allow for employees of the business park convenient access to these services and avoid having to drive downtown or to the Garibaldi Commercial Center, where they're predominantly located. Legislative and district processes for engagement were followed for this application. A development proposal sign was installed on the subject property, and the project was posted on the online development showcase. No comments have been received to date. Staff recommend that bylaw T752 be given first and second reading, and that an electronic and in-person public hearing be scheduled for September 21st, 2021 at 6 p.m. That concludes my presentation. I welcome any comments or questions at this time.
Thanks, Mr. Daly. Council, do you have any questions? Councilor Pettingill?
Yeah, thanks. I'm wondering if staff could clarify what a full service grocery store is, or what the distinction is between that and just a grocery store. I couldn't find that in the zoning bylaw.
So through the chair, there is no difference. A grocery store and a full service grocery store would essentially be considered the same thing. A store that sells food at like a grocery store would not be permitted in the I-9 zone.
So if I can follow up on that, is there a reason why we've done that, or versus just restricting the size? Because, you know, along with a lot of the other proposed uses, it seems like that sort of service might be quite appreciated by people working in the business park.
So through the chair, the intention was not to allow for that use in the business park, as we are trying to maximize employment density there. Those uses are more appropriate in the downtown or the Garibaldi Service Center, which are located quite close to where people live. So the idea being that if you're needing groceries or something like that, you would potentially get them on the way home. And also, they typically require a large amount of space for a grocery store or something like that. So the intention is to not allow that that use is not necessarily appropriate in this location. I'm not sure if that is sufficient to answer your question.
I guess, and I may be getting too specific here, but I'm just sort of thinking, you know, you want to go for lunch and grab a fresh bun and an apple and a little thing of milk or something. To my mind, that I would call that a small grocery store. And so I guess it sounds like that sort of use wouldn't be permitted, or it would be just be called something different.
Yeah, to clarify, so if you're thinking about like a small kind of organic health food store, that potentially could be allowed under retail. The full service grocery store, while not defined in the zoning bylaw, it would be like, you know, one of the larger ones that you'd see downtown Squamish. So that you could potentially allow for that.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Dooley, you used veterinary clinic as a potential use, but that's not a personal service establishment. And it's something that is like a destination. People have to go and take their dogs there. It's not like something I do on my lunch hour. I have to make an appointment.
So through the mayor, it is identified in the definition of personal service establishment, a health and veterinary clinic. So it is specifically identified as a use under the personal service establishment definition. And unfortunately, we have also been seeing this use occurring quite prevalently in new developments in downtown Squamish on the ground floor, which is not the most attractive use that you want to see on a high street or on, you know, a newer commercial frontage, as opposed to something that would be more activated for pedestrians. So it could be appropriate to allow, you know, one in this zone, or, you know, if that use happened to occur here, it might not be that detrimental.
Right. Anything else, Council? The flexibility that we're providing here for the size of the retail suite doesn't really exist downtown. And are we worried about this competing, or do you think the size limitation, the total gross floor area for the retail use, will still allow for the retail spaces downtown?
Through the chair, I would say that's correct. Given that there's quite a substantial reduction in the overall gross floor area size, we don't anticipate that they would be competing with uses in the downtown area. The intention is to just try and increase the flexibility for retail tenants in this location to get a more diverse mix of businesses here, because that really has not been what has been occurring so far.
And can you expand on the changes to the business office minor?
So previously in the I-9 zone, they were only allowed on the second story. And let me just reference the zoning so I get it correctly. So business and professional office minor is only permitted on a second story and is limited to 20% of the gross floor area of a ground floor unit. So those are quite prohibitive restrictions for office minor. And we are trying to incentivize this use, as there's OCP policy that considers this an appropriate use in the business park. And on the existing location that has been built, none of the buildings are 2 stories, so you could only have it in 20% of the floor area of a ground floor unit. So essentially right now, you can't have that anywhere on site.
But, you know, we don't want this to be like a retail zone that the majority of the community would think of, or the type of office environment, like it's not gonna be a dentist's office or a health clinic, which would generate a lot of car traffic. This is supposed to be an office where that's appropriate for the business park, not somewhere else, correct?
That's correct. But we also would like to allow the flexibility for those businesses to grow, should they need to. And restricting them to 20% of the gross floor area of a ground floor unit, or only allowing them on a 2nd story, is kind of prohibitive and would likely make things challenging for professional or office minor users to expand if they needed to.
So what type of user are you thinking?
I mean, engineering firms, survey companies, research and development companies. Those are some examples of office minor users where you're not generating day-to-day customers coming quite frequently. It's an office, it's like mostly an office use where, you know, surveyors would work in their office and then go out in the field and do their work, or similar with an engineering firm.
Councilor Stoner?
Maybe I just missed this, but you mentioned like the current buildings that are there are not 2 stories, but what is like, is there something else in the current zoning that is stopping it from being 2 stories, or could there be a 2nd story of office?
There's nothing stopping it in the current zoning from being 2 stories. The developer just chose to build the existing built portion to 1 story. More than half of the site is undeveloped and will come in for a development permit at some point in the future to construct the remainder of the site. So this is intended to try and increase the flexibility for those users in the future unbuilt portion of the site.
Is there anything that we could then use to like actually encourage that being 2nd floor office? Like we're providing a fair bit of flexibility here in terms of personal services establishment that would likely be on the 1st floor that is a little bit more pedestrian friendly. Could staff consider encouraging, still allowing for that a little bit more flexibility in that business and professional office minor, but keeping it kind of to that 2nd story and above?
Staff did consider this, but we've heard that there's a shortage of this type of office minor space, so we were really trying to allow it more flexibility. I believe it is allowed in the I-8 zone, and it is not, there hasn't been that high of an uptake, but staff thought it was appropriate to allow for this, or to not add constraints for this type of use. The zoning as is seems to be a bit challenging. Obviously, it's only attracted kind of a single type of tenant, so we thought it would be appropriate to allow some more flexibility for the various uses in the zone, and hopefully that would incentivize you know, a greater diversity of uses in there.
Are you done, Councilor Stoner? I can see that you're thinking. Okay,
Thank you. Just want to clarify, based on the mayor's previous question, a doctor's or dentist's office could qualify under personal service, but they would not count as an office minor. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I think I am stumbling over the details of this zone. So how high can buildings be in this zone?
The maximum height is 10.68 meters in I-9. So similar to the property next door in I-8 where that has been fully developed. So they can be about 3 stories.
But next door was all like tilt out, so it can only be mezzanine for the business office minor. It's giving us an opportunity to design buildings that would have some of the retail use that's allowed in this zone, and then put office across, but built as like a building, not a tilt up with mezzanine. So what are we, but you're saying that we still want a ground floor entrance for the business, office, and minor?
We are just not trying to make it prohibitive. So there is the risk that if you only allow business and professional office minor on the second story and the developer chooses to go with a tilt-up construction again, then that would not allow for that. I suppose they could still be accessed off of the ground floor entrance, but that can pose challenges with building code, depending on what other uses are in that building. So we're just trying to increase the flexibility for this. If council is not comfortable with that, that is a fair rationale to have. The intention here was just trying to increase the flexibility for this use to occur since it wasn't occurring already.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the tilt up for light industrial, you want the high ceilings and all that sort of thing. They're not the most efficient buildings to build from a GHG emissions and operations standpoint. So this is supposed to be an area that services the rest of the business park. And I know light industrial is allowed, but there is a different type of building that can be built here that's more efficient, that has, you know, as you walk between all the restaurants there, and you get to sort of personal service establishment, but upstairs there's an architectural office or a surveying office. They don't really require that main floor in the same way that a light industrial use does. I'm just trying to imagine.
Yes, so that is a valid comment, and if council is not comfortable with opening up a professional office minor that openly, then that is a valid concern.
Does it come down to parking, Mr. Gill?
No, it's really just trying to allow more flexibility for this use. The developer is allowed to construct the building how, you know, they're going to propose buildings that are going to be subject to the DPA guidelines on the unbuilt portion of the site, but that's for the form and character. So staff can't mandate a type of building to be built in this. And through this negotiation, we thought it was reasonable to increase the flexibility for this use, as it is while it might not be the most attractive for a pedestrian activation standpoint, it does typically provide high-paying jobs or well-paying jobs. And we were just trying to increase the employment density on the site and really increase the flexibility for this. It is also supported by policy in the OCP to allow this use in the business park. So staff thought it was reasonable to, you know, not keep those conditions of use on that specific use.
But we're not really increasing employment density because we're not doing it by height. We're going to get the same sort of one level businesses that we're already seeing in that area. And so was that our intent with this zone? Or are we actually trying to increase employment density by allowing for multiple floors?
So through the mayor, that is correct. I suppose it is more the intention to try and attract a more diverse mix of uses here. But I can see council's concern, and perhaps that is not an amendment that is appropriate to include in this zoning bylaw amendment. Certainly, staff can look at removing the office minor amendments if council is not comfortable with that.
All right, so your primary purpose in bringing these changes was about the use, a more diverse use, but not so much about increasing the employment density in the I-9.
That's correct. I used the wrong language. I am sorry.
Mr. Velaniskas?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, I just wanted to add to what Brian said. In terms of employment densities, we do know we calculate employment densities by type of use. So certain uses, such as industrial versus office, have very different generate different employment densities per area. And office space is definitely one of the highest from an employment density perspective, one of the highest users. We're bringing this rezoning forward because the applicant applied for it. And we've spent the last year negotiating, kind of doing a little bit of horse trading, how we can limit the kind of commercialization and restaurant use in the area, provide some space for businesses that we're seeing pop up on our high streets, that we know there's lots of demand for. And we also know that there's lots of demand for retail in the district. So we looked at this commercial area of the business park and thought that allowing some flexibility in return for limitation on the restaurant use, would be a positive thing. It could be a win-win for the district and for the property owner.
Thank you. Council, any other questions? Councilor Stoner.
I'm just looking at the current I-9 zone in the zoning bylaw, and some of the conditions of use limit the total gross floor area for business and professional office to just over 1,300 square meters, and retail as well. Are those gross floor areas being changed? Are we removing that limit right now? Is that the proposal?
That's correct. The limitations for business and professional office minor are proposed to be removed.
But not for retail.
Retail, it is being, accessory retail sales are not permitted in association with business and professional office minor uses. That is also being removed. So typically that is not something that is common. Usually an accessory, it's if a business and professional office minor is not seeing day-to-day customers, that kind of would limit a business from having that as an accessory use. Is the intention of
There's also a condition of use that limits the gross floor area of any one retail store to 1,300 square meters. Is that being changed?
Correct. That is, that is staying, and the individual tenancy is being reduced. So the individual tenancy is being reduced to 102 square meters, but the overall maximum is staying. Apologies.
Okay. Not seeing any other hand. And so staff recommendation is to give this 2 readings and then have a public hearing on September 21st. Councilor Stoner?
I will move first reading at this time, and if it's seconded, I'll speak to it.
Councilor Pettingill, second.
So I don't feel entirely comfortable moving both first and second reading and sending this to public hearing at this time. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the full intention and the impacts thereof. So I'd be willing to move first reading with some feedback to staff, in particular, one, having a track changes version of the changes in the zoning bylaw and what that actually would relate in terms of what would then be allowed versus what is currently allowed. So I'm just having a really hard time wrapping my head around what the proposal is relative to what it is that we're trying to achieve with the rezoning. So I don't want to completely stall this, but I'm also not comfortable moving it to second reading.
Other comments? Council Pagano?
Yeah, I'm comfortable supporting this with first reading, given there's been a lot of discussion. I'll just add my 2 cents. I think the one thing that the subjectivity that still comes out in our zoning bylaws, you know, when we speak about grocery stores, comes up with this to me. And I do think whatever we call it, that thing where we can get some groceries just for lunch, not for the week kind of thing, makes sense in terms of the people working in this space. So, you know, I think in general, that's the sort of thing I'd like to support. My understanding of the business park is we want to maximize employment space, avoid it being, you know, destination for just visitors and people doing their weekly commercial activity. That's what our downtown is for. And so I appreciate the, you know, some flexibility here, keeping it focused on servicing those working here. But also in terms of the office minor, I am comfortable expanding it because I think it is consistent with that employment focus. I think in particular in terms of startup and in some of those earlier stage office related activities, which I think are part of our economic development focus or a piece of it, that is lacking. And I think that flexibility somewhere and quite possibly here makes sense. And so I am supportive of some flexibility around the office minor. So in general, this makes sense to me, and I think I could support this.
Council Herford. Oh, sorry, Council Frenchman.
Thanks, Chair. I am quite comfortable giving this first reading and was prepared to give it second reading. There is a delicate balance at play here as we strive to keep downtown type uses in the downtown and Garibaldi commercial area. But I think that what staff has put before us does achieve that flexibility that I think we need on this site, and also maintains that delicate balance of keeping appropriate downtown businesses in that area or up at Garibaldi Estates. So I'll support first reading. Thank you.
Council Herford.
Thank you. I'll be supporting first reading. This office minor piece just makes me think about how a part of the property that is developed is only one story. I'd like to incentivize the development of closer to what is possible on the site from an employment perspective. So there is demand for this office use, and I'd like to provide some flexibility to make that happen. But I'm just concerned that we're putting ourselves in a position where we're going to limit the likelihood of that second or maybe third story of office space being constructed because we've allowed it lower down, and we've sort of limited the potential overall of that piece. And I don't have a full grasp on how that these policies interplay at this point. That's my concern around that office use. I do see a demand for it. It isn't about not satisfying the demand. Like the opposite, I want to make sure that we maximize the potential there. So I think first readings is appropriate, and we'll see how I get some of those things that have been mentioned by council so far addressed for a second. Thank you.
Councilor Anderson.
I will be supporting first reading, and as my colleague John French, I would have also supported first and second. I do share Mayor Elliott's concerns regarding tilt-up concrete construction in industrial parks generally. However, this is not an issue that's going to be solved here. I see it as a very broad industry-wide issue, and it is an issue beyond Squamish. I think that we need to encourage our community of architects and professional designers to look for options for developers in business parks such as this. Is a very broad issue. My concern, however, is less with employment density than with the function. in such a development as at this location. I do note that that the data that we have, the analysis and the surveys that we've done do show a shortage of business office minor space, as we're calling in our zoning bylaw, and the demand is clearly there. I do also concur and support Brian Daly's observation that this area of the business park is better suited to, for example, a veterinary clinic than downtown. I appreciate staff's efforts ongoing to constrain the commercialization, as Mr. Valinsky has referred to, and here restaurant uses as well in the business park. So I'm happy to support first reading. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, I'll support first reading, but I think I would have supported two, but I don't want to make this fail by putting forward amendment. So I'll support first reading. I think so I'll take this opportunity then to say when it comes back for second reading, is just more clarity again on what we're trying to achieve. So it's not about density, it's really about use. But at the same time, you know, what council's been hearing over the last year and a half is about how our employment lens research is telling us that all uses are desired and we need more of them, whether it's light industrial, retail, office. And so, as my colleagues have pointed out, it seems weird that we're going to approve a use that's not really going to improve density of employment or more space for that. And I think that's why I asked my question around parking, Mr. Daly, because often when we go up, there's a higher requirement for parking, right? So then you've got tenants on the main floor and tenants on the second floor and possibly third floor, and then we have parking requirements. And so if this is, we only have half the site left to build out, and so I suppose just some added clarity when this comes back for second reading about why we're not pushing for a higher density here. It would require us to vary them a whole bunch of other things, I think. But I think, as Councilor French said, this zone is so weird because we are not trying to steal uses from downtown or from the Garibaldi village area. We're trying to support the businesses that are in the business park that need some services to make it a desirable place to work and locate your business there, without cannibalizing other uses that we want in downtown and at the Garibaldi village area. So I think you know what you proposed is certainly supportable, but respect my colleagues' needs for a little bit more clarity when this comes back in second reading. So I'll support first reading in that regard. Any other comments? I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Mr. Beals.
Thank you.
Okay, council, let's take a break until 10 to 8, maybe a 10-minute stretch break. Or a recess. Okay, welcome back. We are now on item 9B, and so we are dealing with the housing agreements associated with the DP that we discussed earlier. So first up is the housing agreement bylaw for 37870 Cleveland Avenue affordable rental number 2015-2020 be given first reading. I'll move that. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councilor Herford. Any discussion? Councilor French.
I was intending to second it, but the lag is significant, so.
The lag, all right, no worries. I will call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up, District of Squamish Housing Agreement Bylaw for Plaza Junction Park, 37870 Cleveland Avenue, number 2633, 2021. the first three readings. Moved by Councilor Stoner, seconded by Councilor Herford. Any comments? Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. We're on item 9C, adoption. First up is District of Squamish zoning bylaw amendment bylaw for the university definition and Ample Strata Lot 1 use clarification number 2808, 2021, that this be adopted. Moved by Councilor Herford, second by Councilor Pettingill. Any comments? Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Hope that was a lag, Councilor French. Maybe just don't second anything until you're.
I think that'll be the case tonight.
District of Squamish, payment in lieu of off-street parking spaces. Amendment bylaw number 2837, 2021 be adopted. Moved by Councilor Stoner, seconded by Councilor Herford. Comments? Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. And finally, District of Squamish revenue anticipation borrowing bylaw number 2835, 2021 be adopted. I'll move that. Seconded by Councilor Herford. Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. So we're now on to item 10. Under staff reports, we're going to hear from Mr. Pagely about the body-worn camera stakeholder program implementation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council and members of the viewing audience. I'll just wait for the, well, there we are. Thanks, Terry. This evening, I'm here to present twofold. One is to share some of the overview of the stakeholder program for the body-worn camera program. So if we can go to the next slide, please. And also seek feedback from key stakeholders such as council members this evening. Next slide, please. We've been asked to provide feedback prior to July 13th, which will be forwarded to the E-Division Body-Worn Camera Working Group. And that working group will also then forward their findings to the National Body-Worn Camera Stakeholder Committee to assist them as they move this project forward. Can we go to slide 6, please? The reason, yeah, please. One more. Okay. So body-worn cameras, the use and the impacts to contract partners such as ourselves. I thought this slide would be important to share a couple of highlights. Why the use of body-worn cameras. There's a couple of bullets here. They show what happens during police stops. Obviously, the videos can be used as evidence for complaints or in court. They can encourage better policies and, better policing and public behavior. When will the RCMP have the cameras? This is obviously early stages of this particular program. There has been a pilot project that was put in place, and I will speak to that in a few minutes. But the expectation is that this program will be rolled out in the fall of 2021 through a phased-in approach, and then over the next 18 months, hopefully there'll be complete uptake throughout the country. How much will the cameras cost? Now it's early stages at this point, and they haven't actually completed the RFP for the full rollout of this program, but roughly between $2,000 to $3,000 per camera. So I said these numbers will be confirmed once a vendor is selected. At this point, the phasing in of the finance will be that the first few years will be not funded by the local municipalities, and then eventually we will inherit these costs. I have talked to the local attachment just to get an idea. Will it be every member who will be issued a camera? And the short answer at this point, no. They'll probably have enough cameras for 2 watch commands. So typically we have 4 to 6 folks out on each watch command, and then they'll have their cameras, and the next group will have theirs, and we'll rotate and make sure if there's any downtime or any technical issues, we'll have backup. So we won't be looking at a camera each member. It's actually typically for each watch, and they'll share. Could we put a slide 8, please? Actually, the next slide, please. As I mentioned, there currently is a pilot project occurring in B Division in Nunavut, and I thought it'd be important, you can get a sense of what the body-worn cameras look like here on the officer that's modeling here, and a few of the highlights that have come and learnings from that particular program. So as they noted here, it was launched November 30th of 2020. Approximately 24 cameras rolled out to the general duty officers. A number of communication engagement activities throughout the community. Public response to date has been positive, no significant concerns. They're working on draft policy procedures and making sure that implementation and the modeling is working well. And also working closely with the Crown to meet disclosure requirements. Next slide, please. I won't get into all the details here, but this is just a slide here that, when will the cameras be activated? These will be activated, prior to arriving for calls on service. They're not, but more importantly, they're not intended for 24-hour recording, surveillance, or covert recordings. They're basically going to be engaged when the officer is attending a situation or a call. Next slide, please. And then here are just a few examples of when the cameras will be used for and effective with mental health calls, interaction with people in crisis, crimes in progress, for public disorder and protest, and also for investigations. Officers, as they say here, will let you know when the cameras are being used for recordings. Next slide, please. And if folks are concerned that innocent bystanders have been caught on camera accidentally, there's a process they can access the information and request to get a copy of the video, just for clarity. I won't get into the length of the storage, but next slide, please. Okay, so this one again just goes into a little bit more detail about, will this take the place of notebooks, etc. There'll still be some of the traditional methods of documenting, including other methods like the cameras. And also, who can review and have access to the body-worn camera videos? And that's probably important for members of the public to understand that. So they will have protocols in place and people can access them through a certain process. Next slide, please. And then this is just a little bit of information how you would actually request to view a recording. I think it's also important, and I missed this in the earlier slide, so if I can ask Terry, if you can just go back to the earlier slide, just important rationale about the messaging and why this is being brought forward. Just so you go back to the beginning, I apologize. Let's get through that a little. One more, up. One more. One more. All right, so as many of us know, this is a prime ministerial directive that the Prime Minister committed to back in June 20th. But there's some key wording in the messaging here that I think is important to share with community around the rationale behind this particular important endeavor. Key words such as strengthening RCMP trust, transparency and accountability, with a focus on strengthening trust in relationships and so forth. All right, that concludes my presentation, and at this point there's any questions. Otherwise, I turn it over to the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Paisley. Is there anyone from the RCMP standing by, or are the questions just for me this evening?
No, this evening they will be for me to, but through the chair, if there's answers that I can't provide, I certainly will get those questions and back to council.
Okay. So council, this is our opportunity to provide feedback to E-Division about this project. So you can have questions and comments. Both. I don't think, yeah. Please provide both at the same time, questions and comments. Mr. Paisley will record them and then we'll pass them to them at the end. Councillor Stoner, then French, then Herford.
Thank you. Through the chair, thank you for the presentation, the heads up on this. It's obviously a really large topic, and it being a prime ministerial directive, I don't want to get into the details of whether this is overarchingly a good idea or not. I'll try and restrain my comments to the direct impacts that it'll have on us as a municipality. And the piece that really caught my eye is how video evidence is going to be handled and what the true impacts on workload are going to be. So appreciate that this cost is not being downloaded to us in the first 2 years, but in years 3, 4, and going forward, there is potentially huge cost implications for us, both in terms of the technology as well as the increase in workload in terms of managing the evidence that is collected via that video. So I think for me, that is the biggest standout as put my municipal hat on, is what is the actual implication that it's going to have on our budgets in 4 years' time. And that's just unclear at this point. More generally, I think that there are still pieces that need to be figured out around the policy of when videos can be turned off. There's and procedures around that. There's still a lot of discretion given to officers when that video can be turned on and off. But I will leave that to more area specific expertise and legal counsel to address. I don't necessarily think that's where our comments should come in, but I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor French.
Thanks, Chair. I don't have any questions, but I do fully support the RCMP and other Canadian policing agencies using current technology, modern technology, to provide better and more effective policing. And I look forward to the day when the cameras start recording here in Squamish. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. You know, what jumped out at me in the slides is that this isn't just about general transparency and accountability in particular. It's to deal with racialized and Indigenous communities, a focus there. And I know we have some staff work coming back to us at some point around diversity, equity, inclusion action, and so on. But I'm wondering, you know, in terms of feedback for this, it seems that that's some of the feedback from those communities that is really important to this, it seems to me. And so is there anything we can do to make sure we're providing or helping to facilitate getting that feedback from that portion of our community to the RCMP?
Through the chair, Councillor Petting, I will approach the attachment just to understand what type of protocols will be required to seek out that feedback. At this point, I'm not aware of any, but I will follow up.
And so I'll take it from staff's perspective, that's not something that we're planning to do or feel we have a means to do on behalf of our community, to sort of maybe facilitate a table or something, or
at this point, it's not part of the stakeholder engagement process, but which is run by the RCMP, so I'd have to confirm with the RCMP if that's appropriate or not. Right now, they're just working with their contract agreement folks, such as ourselves, a contract with them. So that's where the stakeholder feedback is coming from at this point. No general public.
Okay, I'll stand down on that for now. Thank you.
Councilor Harper.
Thank you. I think Councilor Stoner hit on some of these where the overall cost escalation, and eventually that hits us. And I also think that the costing laid out, they were talking about physical cameras and not the extra time to manage this this data or evidence, I suppose it would be called, and costs associated with that, as far as drawing on members' time and potentially requiring more admin support, which is generally municipal staff. So that sort of genre of comment is where I am with this, and so I don't know if maybe that's learnings that's going to come out of their trial run, their selected test market, if you will. But I would like to understand that more, and I think it's very important so we can be prepared for financial planning. This isn't just about absorbing the cost of campus.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councilor Anderson?
Just briefly, I'd just like to register my shared perspective with Councillor Herford and Councillor Stoner. I'm concerned about policing costs and that perspective on this project. And I think that the senior levels of government should be also share our concerns around this topic. I'm a little bit saddened, really, that we are here visiting a need for this type of technology. I know it's going to have its benefits, and I do share Councillor French's interest in that we need to be up to date. But having a number of police officer friends and family, and knowing what they do and what our local officers do to build trust in the community through other means, including lots of volunteer time and effort, I guess I can't help but express a little bit of regret. But I hope that the program costs will be reviewed carefully. They will have implications for sure. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll add my comments to this. I think my feedback to E-Division on when the public requests their video or complainant requests their video should have a timeline like we have on FOIs. It's 30 days. So not drag it out and wait months and months, but there is a very specific and short timeline in which to produce the video that's been requested, and that should be part of the policy, not when we get around to it. I think in the fall economic statement, so I don't really understand why the fiscal impact to us is in 24-25. So it said in the fall economic statement that it announced that it includes $238.5 million spread over 6 years to buy the cameras and set up a system for collecting video, with an additional $50 million a year for maintaining the system when it is complete. And so if that initial funding is spread over 6 years, why would we see an impact to us in 24 and 25? I suppose is my question back to E-Division. It seemed to me from the fall economic statement that those costs should be covered for a longer period of time, and just because our Prime Minister says something doesn't mean that local governments have to bear the brunt of the cost of it. I share my colleagues' concerns that once do you have to write your notes and then do you have to watch the video, or do you just get to write your notes and then you only have to watch the video if there's a complaint or it's needed for evidence? Because we've just added another step. There's already lots of paperwork. So I'm not clear whether each officer has to watch the video from their shift after every shift. I would hope not, but that's not clear in what was presented in the slides. Do you know, Mr. Pagely, if this technology will involve facial recognition?
Sorry, you tailed off, Mariella, at the last second. I couldn't hear the last 3 words.
Do you know if the technology they're deploying involves facial recognition?
No, I don't, but I can inquire into that.
Studies have shown that that disproportionately impacts racialized people negatively, so it would not be something that I would be looking for or wanting. So I just wanted to make sure. The other piece is that cameras don't solve systemic bias and they don't solve racism. So if I was an officer, and I am not speaking generally about our local police force and these hardworking folks, speaking generally and systemically. But if I'm going to racially profile someone, I can still do it with a body camera. I might just do it nicely, but it doesn't mean that I haven't stopped them because of the color of their skin or their background. And we put in our submission to the Committee on Reforming the Police Act that training for officers in the RCMP, and we know our officers are asking for more training on this as well, is currently an online course. And we think it should be more of an experiential training around systemic bias and the impacts of colonialism. Should be a much deeper training for our officers, and also around de-escalation techniques. So I think training, we have to see an improvement and an investment in training for our officers on the things that also build trust. It's not the cameras that build trust. It's people knowing that their officers don't hold a bias or a racist. And that requires hard work, not just the cameras. We also asked in our letter that they update the scenarios in de-escalation training so that it challenges people's sense of racial profiling or systemic bias. So I think we should pull those 2 pieces from our letter to the Committee Reforming the Police Act and emphasize that training is and recruitment and who we recruit is so much more important than just putting cameras on people. It doesn't solve the root of the problem. So I think that's an important piece to send back to them. And finally, I think that each detachment should have a baseline measurement of their interactions, their use of force, how many of their interactions are with people from racialized communities, so that we know whether the cameras are actually improving things. If we don't have a baseline measure, how do we know that the cameras are doing their job and building trust? So maybe it is a survey out to the community that measures trust in the RCMP, and then we do it again 3 years after the cameras are implemented. But what are we measuring here? Our Prime Minister had an idea and said it out loud, and now we're going to bear the cost and the impacts of that without really thinking through what it is we're trying to change. How do we measure that change? And I don't see anything in these slides that talk about measuring our current state so we know whether our cameras help us get to a better future state. And so I think this is hasty and not well thought through. And certainly they have a role to play, but a role to play in a much bigger context of addressing the real issue, which I don't see here. So I'll get off my soapbox now. Yeah, I have pretty fulsome feedback around this issue. That's a penguin.
Yeah, thanks. And I appreciate the mayor's comments, and I don't want to dismiss the concerns around cost, but just trying to refine my my question a little bit into a comment. I think, racialized Indigenous people are part of our community, and it's not they're not a stakeholder group apart from us. And so I think our feedback on behalf of our whole community, we either need to take the time to make sure we are collecting feedback and presenting on behalf of that portion of our community, given that it is one of the explicit groups meant to be served by this, or if we don't feel we have the capacity or time to do that, I think we need to explicitly state that that is a gap right now, that piece we haven't commented on because we haven't had the time. But I think that is something to note and to explicitly call out that that is a missing piece that needs to be addressed here.
So, Mr. Paisley, did you get enough feedback there?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And we'll put this together and submit this on behalf of council.
All right, so the motion is that the district is going to provide feedback about the body-worn camera stakeholder program implementation to the RCMP as follows. So I heard comments on time it will take and the time to manage this level of evidence, the need for feedback from racialized communities, not just from local government contract partners, as well as First Nations. Time limit within which they have to provide video surveillance back when they receive a public request. 30 days would seem reasonable. A better sense of the true costs and when those costs are coming into play for local governments, and whether we just have to pay for the cameras or whether that $50 million will always pay for the system. Like, we don't have to ever pay for the system part of it, but I suspect we'll get dinged for the cameras. The need for better training to address the issues of systemic racism and bias, as well as de-escalation, better de-escalation training, and baseline measurements about what are the statistics today about interactions with racialized communities, and trust, and what the goals are for the cameras and how we'll measure that. Did I miss anything, Council? All right. Mr. Paisley, did I miss anything?
And I also note, maybe I missed it in your comments, Marielle, but also clarifying policies around engaging and disengaging the cameras and ensuring that there's proper protocols around that.
Yeah, thank you. All right, does someone want to move that motion? By Councilor Hurd, seconded by Councilor Stoner. Thank you. Mr. Paisley.
Thank you.
All of them, or any opposed? Motion carries. Moving right along. Next up is facilities, item 10B, the Brennan Park super duper emergency exit stairs. Ms. Say.
Good evening. I'm ready, yeah. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here tonight to discuss the Brennan Park emergency exit stairs project. So the two emergency exit stairs off the top of the arena bleachers failed an engineering examination back in 2018 after 37 years of use. One set was replaced at the time with a temporary structure and the other was reinforced to give it a few more years of life. We then went through a tender process in late 2019 and the work was awarded to McGrath Construction to start in 2020 for $177,000. For the removal of the temporary the stairs that were there and the supply and install of 2 new stairs, which had been designed in 2019. So work did start in 2020 and both stairs were removed and the ground was prepared. We did experience considerable delays due to COVID and due to some geotechnical issues with the ground that needed quite a bit of extra work to prepare it before we could put the footings in. And then the footings started in early 2021. And then it was at that time in April that McGrath Construction informed us that their company was folding. And so in consultation with our procurement department, we issued a new tender package in mid-May of this year with completion plan for early September so that it would coincide with the rink opening and the user groups needing to use the bleachers for spectators. We received 5 bids, and the lowest bid was for $248,900 with Roma Building Restorations. And in discussion with those that were bidding on the project, they did all comment that we should expect to see increases in costs since the original bid had come in, due, of course, to the higher cost of materials, primarily steel in this case. So we currently have $100,000 left in the budget this year. And so staff started to look at options to fund this shortfall of $150,000 to take us up to the bid received from Roma. So we looked at it as a project that we had planned to do this year to replace the dehumidifier at the arena, budget at $175,000. And the original plan had been to replace this dehumidifier with a gas version, which is what we have right now. But then when we started to talk to the engineering department with the energy manager and embarked on the energy study that we're currently doing for Brennan Park, with initial discussions with the energy consultants, we decided to postpone that project until next year so that we would have a chance to review the findings from the energy project, and they were confident that they would be able to come up with an electric version that would save considerably on energy, particularly gas consumption. And so staff back in June had decided to postpone this project, this dehumidifier project, into 2021. Also, timing-wise, that project would have to be completed when ice is out, which is typically June and July and early August. So we would have missed the window for this year anyway. And so staff, and then that project will come back next year in a different format, that dehumidifier project. It will be a different scope of work, and we'll submit that for consideration for 2022. So staff are recommending that we use the money from the dehumidifier budget to fund the shortfall of $150,000. And so the resolution is that the District of Squamish approve reallocating $150,000 from the Brennan Park dehumidifier budget for the Brennan Park emergency exit stair replacement project, and that council authorize the award of the project to Roma Building Restorations for $248,900. Does anyone have any questions?
I do. Does anybody else? Councilor Herford?
Thank you. With the contractor going folding or going bankrupt, whatever happened to them, did the district lose anything in that besides time?
No, we had paid them only for the work that they had completed.
Okay. And then, okay, and I'll leave it there.
Ms. Say, these bids are considerably higher than the original one, but what works already been completed?
The work that needs to be completed, all that has been completed is the stairs are gone and the footings are in place. So now the concrete needs to be poured, the stairs need to be fabricated and installed, and the asphalt around the area needs to be done. So the majority of the work is still left to be done. And the expensive portion, which is the fabrication of the stairs and the install of the stairs.
And so there's no option to use the temporary stairs until prices moderate post-COVID?
The temporary stairs that we had in place, had to be engineered, and so were expensive to install, and then we had to pay rental fee to the scaffolding company that erected the stairs. They were not particularly good-looking stairs, and they were approved temporarily by the engineer, but I don't believe that they would approve those as a permanent fixture. They wouldn't have the same sort of lifespan as the new stairs would, which would be another 35 years.
I guess emergency slides aren't an option.
Those stairs are used constantly by staff too, in and out of the building, particularly cleaning staff at night access the arena side. The offices up there, back down to the garbage area out the back. Staff access the offices upstairs through those stairs, so they don't come through the main building. So they're used constantly by staff as well as emergency stairs for that. For their patients.
Will these very expensive stairs outlast any renovations we do to Brennan Park in the future?
They have been the design the architects that have designed these stairs are aware of the original plans for that area, and these stairs will work within the original plans for that area of the arena. So at this point, yes, they should work in with the renovation plan.
Okay. Councilor Herbert.
Sorry, one more. And this, the amount being asked for here, or reallocation, is the cost escalation. We're not anticipating more cost escalation from this. So you made a comment there in the middle, and I just wasn't about the escalation. I just wasn't sure if this really encompassed that, or if there was a need for some sort of contingency.
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
So the cost escalation from the first, was it
177, yeah.
77 to this full amount of 248, that is the cost escalation we're talking about. We're not talking about having any more contingency for more escalation. This is
no, there shouldn't be, because the unknown was the ground, the geotechnical issues, which until we had removed the stairs and dug down, we weren't sure. I think that the engineer and the architects believe that was the only sort of wild card that we didn't know about, but now it's pretty straightforward.
So, okay, and this is contract to provide those stairs, not this is what we think it'll cost now, but by the time we put it in 3 months and the cost of steel has gone up another 30%, we're not on the hook for that. That would be the risk of the contractor.
Well, we would issue the contract if you approved it this evening. We could issue the contract tomorrow, and then they would be holding their price firm.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Council? All right, so the motion is to approve reallocating $150,000 from the dehumidifier project to authorize the award of the Roma building restorations for $248,900. It's hard to say for stairs. Look, I could build a house for that. Council Pettengill moves, seconded by Council Stoner. Any comments? That's from my slide and snarky comments. Council Pettengill.
Yeah, it is hard to wrap my head around $250,000 for some stairs. But I guess if that's what stairs are, that's what they are. It's painful to pay that. But on the flip side, I think it's a real win to be avoiding some fossil infrastructure. So that kind of softens the blow a little bit. And so with that, I will be supporting this.
Thanks. Any other comments?
Thank you. I'll be supporting this. I'm confident that staff has been creative in trying to find other solutions besides this $250,000 set of stairs. So I know that by the time we get here, I have the utmost confidence that this is what fortunately needs doing. So I'll be supporting.
I'm so shocked I have no comments. It's a hard pill to swallow. And I know other businesses are experiencing the same thing across materials. So, yeah, I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Ms. C.
Thank you.
All right, next up, 10C, Financial Services Commercial Card Program. Mr. Jeffrey is joining us. Sorry to keep you waiting so long.
That's okay. I had nothing better to do this evening other than keep the kids up later than usual, so it's all good. Thank you, Mayor and Council. It's good to see you tonight and discuss commercial card program. I'll just start sharing my screen. That works. And I've got just a little presentation. Let me know when you can see it. And then we can get into a bit on the social procurement piece of cards.
All right, we can see your presentation.
Sweet. So, commercial card program, the goal for tonight is that Council approve the following resolution: that the District of Squamish is authorised to borrow from and incur other obligations to the Bank of Montreal with respect to the Bank of Montreal's commercial card program. As part of the contract package with BMO, this is a resolution that they require that Council pass or approve. So in a nutshell, commercial card programs have been around for about 20, 25 years. My first exposure to them was back in the good old days of the late 90s, working for the Australian government. They're quite robust, you know, they're quite well developed. They have a lot of good benefits to them, which we can discuss in further detail. But the intent is to basically give a credit card, a MasterCard to staff who are currently running around with local orders or purchase orders and give them a payment tool they can use to pay for stuff and procure stuff. It also, we're accessing it through the BC's government CSA agreement program. So that's been around since 2007. They've had an agreement with BMO, and there's quite a lot of local government, public sector in BC that are signed up under that CSA agreement. The big benefits for us as an organisation is it simplifies the procure to pay process. You know, for low dollar purchases, we can spend a lot of time processing invoices. As I mentioned in the RTC, we do about 17,000 invoices a year, and about 15,000 of those are under $5,000. By joining the CSA through the province, we get rebate on the spend, something we probably wouldn't qualify for on our own. So that's another benefit. And then it also allows us to incorporate some of our social procurement objectives into P-cards, the P-card program. So what we were hoping to do is model that on, can you see the City of Victoria small spends for community benefits?
Yes.
Is model it on something similar to what Victoria's done, and they've been doing for about 2 or 3 years now. They've had the BMO P cards for 10, maybe 15 years. So this is kind of a mature P card program that they had in place. What they've done is just incorporate more social procurement into it. They've aligned it with the city's priorities, you know, and then they're encouraging staff and training staff to consider supply chains, living wages, and local jobs when deciding to procure local, you know, low dollar stuff. So they've got a whole program around it where, you know, they're getting into the concentric circle considerations. You know, instead of starting with Amazon, maybe considering, you know, a local supplier can supply the same product, because then you get into the economic multiplier effect and all that good stuff, you know, the local benefits that derive from that. So we're hoping to kind of model our program on what they've done. And it's really good time to be able to do it. Like normally when you're rolling out a P-card program, there'd be training involved, you know, where you can use the card. There'd be training on that current policy, you know, training on the P-card procedure policy that will develop as well, so that, you know, staff are aware of where they can use it, how they can use it, and to take into consideration those social procurement values and benefits that will hopefully affect the local community in a positive manner. Well, just shut down my presentation, but the next slide was basically going to be questions, comments.
Thank you. Council, any questions? Councilor Pagno.
Yeah, thanks for that. I like the program. I understand that BMO has some, you know, program that's recognized by the province, but are there options for credit unions or that sort of more community financial institution and this sort of thing, and just working with a partner that's not invested in fossil development and that kind of thing, or are we really, you kind of have to go with the provincially recognized BMO for this kind of program?
Thank you, through the chair. Good question, Councillor Pettingale. That's a really good comment, because basically in the Canadian marketplace, there's two commercial card programs. There's the one MasterCard through BMO, and then there's Visa card through Scotiabank. The credit unions don't really offer a commercial card program of this magnitude. And one of the benefits for us is the rebate that we get by joining or pulling our spend with other players in the market, so other local governments and stuff, so that increases the benefit. So I've got a visitor. Can you go see Mum? Oh, I don't see Mum. Oh, here we go. Okay. So yeah, and something was considered, because I know Aaron Stone, the mayor of Ladysmith, he did that. He went through a credit union for their banking services, but they didn't do it for their P cards. So that was, they saw the benefit and the social value of going through a local credit union for their banking services. But it's a bit different space in the credit card market.
It's so nice to have young voices interested in local government. Mr. Jeffrey, when would our training roll out if we adopt this tonight for our staff on how to use P cards for social value?
Sorry, I missed half of that question, Mariella. Can you repeat it, please?
If we approve this tonight, when would the training and the program roll out for our staff so that they can use these cards for social benefit?
We're hoping to get it up and running in the next 3 to 6 months. Basically, the big holdup at the moment is getting all the contract documents signed, getting this resolution, and then as we work with BMO and rolling it out, there's a bit of a lag and time delay in ordering cards and getting the Spend Dynamics as the software system that supports it, getting that set up. So that's kind of the time frame we're hoping to work towards, is something by the end of the year, hopefully within the next three months.
Great, thanks. Any other questions? Good. We should pass this resolution so that Mr. Jeffrey's child can go to bed.
Thank you.
Moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor French. Any further comments? Councillor Stoner?
Just really briefly, thank you so much for bringing this forward. I think this makes a lot of sense in the context of our social procurement policy work. I had a similar question to Councillor Pettingill and appreciate that the space is just a bit different and there's limited options here, but I think that this is a good step in the right direction, and I look forward to the rollout with staff. Thanks.
Great. Councillor French, did you want to comment, or am I experiencing it the right?
Yes, I would like to comment. So much like Mr. Jeffrey, I too had a company card back in the late 90s. I found it very handy and it worked very well for the company I worked for at that time. And this is an important program for the District of Squamish. In the world of efficiencies, this initiative is right up there. It'll eliminate antiquated paper systems that require multiple touches from many different people. And I see how these cards will streamline our operations and ultimately create the kind of savings taxpayers really appreciate. So I support the staff recommendation and will be voting in favor of the motion.
Thanks, Councillor Ford.
Thank you. I'll be supporting this this motion. I really like the efficiencies provided. My only reservations are around the training of the social procurement side, but I like that we're already thinking about that, and that's a key part of the rollout. So be sort of an afterthought. So I appreciate that, and happy to support this. I look forward to seeing you forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Looking forward to also the efficiencies and the reporting and oversight that this provides, but mostly, broadening how we think about where we purchase, how we purchase, and making that something that all of our staff with these cards are thinking about, not just Mr. Jeffrey, in the procurement process. So I think it's a really good step now that we're part of the BC Social Procurement Initiative. I will call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Now everyone can go to bed at your house, Mr. Jeffrey. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Hey, council, we're on to our consent agenda, item 11. Anything that is in the consent agenda that might present a conflict of interest to you, or anything that you wish to have debated or voted on should be pulled at this time. Councilor Stoner.
Letter 12, please.
Councilor French.
I was actually looking for number 12 as well.
Anything else? Thanks. So we'll deal with that at the end of item 13. Someone like to move the rest of the consent agenda? Moved by Councilor Herford, second by Councilor Stoner. Any opposed? Motion carries. No late agenda items today, so we're on to 13, correspondence under action requested. That the email from S. Lingard around the native plant policy concerns be referred to staff for follow-up and response. Moved by Councilor Herford, seconded by Mr. Stoner. Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. That the correspondence from N. Layton regarding the Squamish Spit be referred to the Director of Engineering for a follow-up and response. Moved by Councilor Herford. I'll second that. Any opposed? Motion carries. Correspondence from D. Bauman regarding the short-term business license appeal be referred to the Director of Community Planning for follow-up and response. As moved by Councilor Anderson, seconded by Councilor Stoner. Any opposed? Motion carries. Correspondence from S. Lingard regarding guidelines to protect birds from building collisions. This was a really interesting letter, actually, and I so appreciate her sending it in. I learned a lot, and so I look forward to referring this to the Director of Community Planning for follow-up and response. Moved by Councilor Herford, I'll second that. Yeah. Any opposed? Motion carries. And correspondence from G. Young regarding Airbnb in Squamish be referred to the Director of Community Planning for follow-up and response. Moved by Councilor Herford, second by Councilor Stoner. Any opposed? Motion carries. Councilor Stoner, letter 12 from Eston Broom.
Thank you. I wanted to refer this to staff. It is not common that we get such positive reviews, especially for our bylaw staff, and we've had lots of communication with Mr. Brune over the years, so I wanted to make sure that they saw the positive remarks that we received, and so I'd just like to forward to staff.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councilor Herford. Any other comments?
No.
Councilor French.
Yeah, thanks. I was similar motivation to Councillor Stoner for pulling this to highlight the praise directed at the bylaw enforcement staff. If they certainly deserve to know that this feedback has been given. And the situation at the top of Perth is quite familiar to me, and the level of patience the bylaw team has demonstrated on this file is extraordinary. They've been dealing with frustrated residents, uninformed visitors, and uncooperative drivers for many months up there at the top of Perth, and the bylaw team definitely deserves to know that their work is appreciated.
Thank you. I will call the question. Any opposed? Carries. Okay, we're on to item 14, approval of minutes. We have recommendations from Committee of the Whole from June 22nd that the District of Squamish refer the motion proposed by the BC chapter of the Coalition for Healthy School Food to staff to bring back any budget implications and a staff recommendation at a future council meeting. Moved by Councilor Herford, second by Councilor Stoner. Any opposed? Motion carries. That the District of Squamish authorize the mayor and corporate officer to execute the annual operating agreement for 2021-22 between BC Transit and the District of Squamish. Moved by Councilor Herford, second by Councilor Stoner. Any opposed? Motion carries. And that the District of Squamish approve the amendments to the Squamish Community Grant Foundation Grant Agreement as presented on June 22nd. That the General Manager of Community Services be authorized to execute the amended agreement, and that staff bring back a policy amendment for discussion at a future community of the whole meeting to limit grants in regards to religious, political, and sport organizations. Moved by Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Stoner. Any opposed? Motion carries. And that we approve the amendments to the Squamish Arts Council Grant Agreement presented on June 22nd. That the GM of Community Services be authorized to execute that agreement, and that staff bring back a policy amendment regarding limited grants to religious, political, and sport organizations. I'll move that. Seconded by Councillor Stoner. Any opposed? Motion carries. That the District of Squamish received a report from Community Services dated June 22nd outlining the progress on the district dog off leash project, animal control bylaw review, and next steps. By Councillor French, seconded by me. Any opposed? Motion carries. That we received the Q1 2021 quarterly financial report for information. Moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any opposed? Motion carries. And that the District of Squamish received the report from Financial Services dated June 22nd, 2021. It probably should include the words capital planning report from Financial Services. Dated June 22nd, 2021 for information. Moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor Stoner. Your hand broken, Councillor Pettingill. You've been letting everyone else do the work here. It's late, you know. You could just. Anyway. Any opposed? Motion carries. Sorry for thinking. Any business arriving from the minutes? We don't have any items under 16 or 17. We have no unscheduled public attendance. Open question period for clarification. No one. Any council or staff announcements? Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. The West Coast Railway Heritage Park has a new name. It is now the Railway Museum of British Columbia. And on Canada Day, July 1st, was the seasonal opening of the museum and the unveiling of the new brand, new displays, and features for visitors. I took the opportunity on that day to explore the whole site, where I'm always noticing new things and chatting with very friendly volunteers and very familiar faces, I'm sure, to most of us. I've been there a long time. And they're sure to keep you a while because they've got lots of stories to tell themselves. So many families were enjoying the site on Canada Day, mostly from the Lower Mainland. The parking lot was full. The Railway Museum is open Saturdays through September. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor French.
Chair, I just have a recollection that maybe there is an item under 17 in camera announcements. It's
That would bring it if there was.
am I correct?
Staff would bring it forward if there was, Councillor French, so we're good.
Thank you.
Councillor Pettingill and then Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, thanks. So I alluded to it earlier, but I've found this past week a little bit overwhelming with the forest fires and 2 different ocean fires, and you know, the heat deaths and the heat dome and 48 degrees Celsius in Siberia. And then, you know, we keep finding new residential schools announcing grave sites. So, you know, it's, I think, been a lot of challenging time for a lot of people, but some Squamish Nation members hosted led a march and then a great big drum and singing circle at OCM Pavilion Park. And it was a very, very joyful, just wonderful celebration. And, you know, I think it was last Monday, I attended the Helping Hands AGM. And with COVID, it's been hard to keep track of sort of lost track of time a little bit. It's just been a surreal time, but the amount of accomplishments of Helping Hands over the last year is just unbelievable. And the positive impact it has had and continues to have on our community is amazing. So just hands off to the board there, to Maureen and all of the staff, and everyone who's making that such a wonderful success. And really, I think in some ways a fantastic heart to our downtown. And so thank you so much to Helping Hands, and congratulations on an incredible year.
Thank you. Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. I have an update on the most recent SLRD meeting that Mayor Elliott and I attended as directors for the SLRD board on June 23rd and 24th. A few things to highlight from the regular board meeting. There was a delegation from BC Hydro providing an update that they're kicking off their Check-Miss Water Use Plan Order Review. The water use plan for the area was developed in 2005. And so it's been 15 years of implementation, and so they're undergoing a review of that order. Our staff from the District of Squamish are involved, as well as some from the SLRD, but they will also be kicking off public engagement. If folks are interested, that's bchydro.com/Check-A-Miss-Watershed for more details. In the business meeting, we also adopted the 2020 Statement of Financial Information, as was required by the Local Government Act. In the Committee of the Whole, we received a really interesting presentation from a representative from the Williwatt Nation and a consulting firm that they've hired called ClearCourse, led by Veronica Woodruff, who spoke about a project that they have been leading, which is looking into options for mitigating the detrimental effects that were caused by the 2010 Meager Creek landslide. So they're looking at natural restoration processes that can help to mitigate the flood risk impact that it now has on Pemberton, as well as the impact that it has on fish habitat and wildlife habitat corridors. And they have a number of academic partners that are being brought into the fold of that project, including BCIT, Quest University, UBC, SFU, Royal Roads, and we put in a plug to also link in School District 48 because there's lots of interest from the K-12s as well. The other thing that I wanted to note is that the Tiger Bay development at South Britannia Beach came forward to Committee of the Whole. This is a relatively large rezoning in South Britannia Beach from rural resource to a mixed-use development, including commercial, residential, and a large surf park. There are still lots of outstanding items, but this has been kicked around the board a number of times, and it did get approval to go forward to first reading, contingent on a number of additional pieces of information coming forward, specifically around the affordable housing unit numbers and diversity, some of the ongoing transportation concerns, and a number of other requirements that will be required with respect to fire protection, all kinds of things. But I thought it would be worth at least flagging for folks that continues to kind of move ahead in the process. Mayor Elliott, did I miss anything?
No, I think you captured the highlights there.
Great. I have one other announcement that I would like to share with council knows most of this, but staff and the community. I am now 36 weeks pregnant. It's been easy to hide it in Zoom meetings, and I haven't been out in the community very much. But I did want to let folks know that my intention is to stay in council meetings for as long as possible until the August break. I am due in early August, so there's a small chance that I may just disappear if baby decides to come early, and that is why. And then subsequent to that, I will be taking advantage of the fantastic policy that we have in place that we brought in 2018 around parental leave, and we'll be taking a 6-month leave of absence to have a baby and start that new adventure. So just wanted to let folks know that that is coming up.
Thanks, Councillor Stoner. And I just want to put forward a motion that staff bring back a resolution to enable Councillor Stoner's leave to the July 20th, 2021 meeting. We still require the leave of council despite our policy, just to dot the i's and cross the t's. So we want to make that official for you. So is there a second for that motion? Seconded by Councilor Herford. And of course, we all wish you this a really wonderful leave. We will miss you, certainly. But very happy that we have that policy in place, and hopefully your example shows other young folks that they should and can run for council and still have families. So thank you for that. I will call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Any other announcements? I'll just say that there's a mayor's drop-in tomorrow from 11 to 12. It's an open topic discussion, so anyone can bring anything they want that's on their mind, or a new idea, or an opportunity, or a challenge that they're having in this meeting. All right. Thanks, everyone. Motion to terminate by Councilor Stoner, second by Councilor Herford. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, everyone. Thank you to our staff for supporting us this evening. Thank you to the community. And we'll see you in a week.